You could always create default metadata. Not ideal, but at least the bottom line is if you have a retention, if you have some sort of policies in place for all your documents, at least minimally things will get labeled. So we're going to focus on that today, creating default document or default metadata that would populate. So how do you do it? It's really basic. So you can do it either. So as an architect, I find a lot of times in organizations that I work in, metadata is always a huge pain, like to use it or not to use it. Do we just put everything in the file name, like all like an identifier and then the file name and then maybe a code, which I see a lot of companies do, or just use just the file name as everything with respect to the metadata or the identifier for that document. Obviously, it depends on the maturity of your organization, the maturity of your employees and who's working with it, how well they're versed in SharePoint. It all depends. But something I always offer to clients is even though metadata may be difficult and a concept that people may not readily understand if they're coming from a background, no document management or no SharePoint, one thing you could always do, you could always create default metadata. Not ideal, but at least the bottom line is if you have a retention, if you have some sort of policies in place for all your documents, at least minimally things will get labeled. So we're going to focus on that today, creating default document or default metadata that would populate. So how do you do it? It's really basic. So you can do it either by when you create a column. So let's, for example, we'll do another choice column, and then we can say, actually, you know what? Let's just use this exact existing choice column. So we're going to edit the choice column and then we're going to set a default value. So not started. So now when we upload a document to this library, it'll always have not started included. So that's an easy, simple way to have metadata. So that's an easy way, simple way to allow for metadata to be automatically populated. Let's see. Okay, so I'm going to create a folder, folder one, get a green color. Okay, so I'm going to go back to library settings, oh, and then folder one. Okay. Okay. Okay, so it's hopefully you follow what I'm doing, but basically what's happening here is at the root, the default value will be not started, but if people move documents to folder one, then the default value becomes completed. Okay, so once again, that's another way that you can manually set metadata or have it set automatically. So if we move a document, can we just drag it in here? Yeah, looks like it. So now that we document here, document status it should set as what I set it to, but let's take a look again. Sometimes I should try these things out before I even I teach people, but I save all that for my training courses. This is just SharePoint. This is just YouTube. Okay, so looks pretty straightforward. So folder one, and the default value should be that. Now, I did drag and drop, so maybe drag and drop doesn't necessarily work. Let's actually upload a document directly into this folder. Again, if it works, once again, tisk, SharePoint or Microsoft, matter. And of course it works. Again, ideally you would think it should work with a drag and drop, but it doesn't. But either way, I think you get the idea. If people upload to this library, it'll set the default value to whatever's been set in the library settings. And then when they upload to this folder, it sets it to the default setting. So in a sense, this library setting here, so column default value settings overrides what the actual column settings are. So if you remember the column settings that I set for that column, in this case, the document status I set to not started. But because I have a setting here, this overrides that setting of not started, and it's going to respect this value that I specify here. So that's pretty much it that I wanted to show you guys with respect to how to leverage metadata and kind of make it easier for users that necessarily don't want to use it. That's pretty much it that I wanted to cover. And thank you. See you in the next video.